New Zealand is miles away from every major country in the world, but they have something they take advantage of, and that's milk. Developed cities, good living standards, and luxury that became possible only thanks to milk. Because New Zealand is not ruled by the people. Watch today's video to learn more. There is a saying in New Zealand that there are more cattle in New Zealand than people. It's hard to believe, but New Zealand has a population of about 5.12 million. However, it is interesting that there are 30 million cattle. You heard right. Domestic animals include dairy cows as well as beef cow and sheep, and they made it their biggest advantage. New Zealand is 36 times smaller than the United States. In 2022, the United States exported dairy products by 2.82 million metric tons, while New Zealand 1.4 million metric tons of dairy products. It is important to talk about exports because exports bring money from other countries. Fonterra Cooperative Group is New Zealand's largest farmer-owned cooperative. This company exports 30% of the world's dairy products. Their products are sold in 140 countries worldwide, and they employ 10,000 people. We understand a bit about the economy. What is the economy of a country? The economy is the area where goods are produced and consumed, where trade takes place, and where goods are produced and marketed. The economy is often divided into three categories: primary, secondary, and tertiary. The primary sector is agriculture and agriculture-related activities. The secondary sector is the production of products, where the production of the primary sector is changed and refined so that something new is born from it. And the tertiary sector is a service sector that focuses on distribution. These are all the industries that support the primary and secondary sectors. You may have learned that countries that often rely on primary sectors such as agriculture are underdeveloped, but this is not the case with New Zealand. However, New Zealand's economy is unique. If we look at New Zealand's GDP, 7% comes from the primary sector. If you look at New Zealand's biggest exports, 6 of the top 10 products are related to agriculture, farming, and food processing. This sector alone accounts for almost 60% of their total exports, which is quite significant. New Zealand is among the 2 main exporters of butter, cheese, and whole milk powder. Therefore, it can be said that animals are responsible for the prosperity and development of New Zealand as a nation. The economy is not enriched by increasing the number of cows, but by the correct use of resources. And this will only happen if the government supports farmers and makes good policies that will benefit everyone in the long run. Earlier we said that there are 30 million cattle in New Zealand, but the most interesting thing is that there were no cows until 200 years ago. So where did those cows come from? From Great Britain. There was a time when it was said that the sun never set on the Britain because they had colonies all over the world. New Zealand was also a British colony and part of the Commonwealth. The indigenous people of New Zealand are called Maori. Their indigenous peoples' cultures was completely different from that of modern New Zealand. Most of the people living in New Zealand today are Europeans who came there in the last 400 years. Britishers did the same to the Maori as to other colonized countries. At first, the Maori traded with French and Dutch traders. British missionaries first arrived there in 1814 and brought cattle with them, because there was plenty of pasture and fodder for cattle. In 1840, the Maori and the New Zealand Company signed a treaty with the British called the Treaty of Waitangi, and with that treaty the Maori became a British resource and began to receive crown protection. Then the Maori lost their independence because of cattle. Basically, New Zealand became an English colony thanks to this treaty. New Zealand was quite pastoral, meaning there was a lot of grassland, so agriculture naturally flourished there. The Maori have always been involved in farming and trading their goods with European traders. But after the 1850s, the focus shifted to sheep farming. In the 1870s, Britain focused heavily on roads, railways, and infrastructure, and after innovation of refrigeration, New Zealand also began to focus on dairy farming in 1900. New Zealand became a kingdom in 1907. When Britain was fighting in Europe, they were in dire need of dairy products such as cheese and butter, and they promoted New Zealand's dairy industry. Since then, New Zealand has become their main supplier of dairy products, wool and meat. So much so that in 1928, New Zealand dairy farmers founded Amalgamated Dairy to market butter and cheese in Great Britain. Already during the Second World War, New Zealand became Britain's sole supplier of dairy products. With Britain's support, sheep and dairy products accounted for 90% of New Zealand's total exports. The UK was a protected market for them, and they got guaranteed prices there. What is the guaranteed price now? You see, the goods would have taken weeks to reach England from New Zealand. and the New Zealand merchants had to bear the risk here. What if the ship sinks? What if pirates attacked? What if prices go down? The risk is there, but Britain didn't want New Zealand to stop supplying them, so they created a system specifically for New Zealand, the guaranteed price. This means that even if the price goes down, New Zealand traders will still get the same price. The more milk you produce and sell, the more you are guaranteed to earn. The system worked well until 1955. In 1955, Great Britain stopped giving guaranteed prices to New Zealand, and that was a huge blow to New Zealand. But then New Zealand realized that cows really are cash cows. They just had to find a new market for dairy products. They focused on it for the next 20 years, but then another shock hit. In 1973, Great Britain joined the European Economic Community. The existing agreements with New Zealand had to be cancelled. New Zealand was already in bad shape due to the loss of the British market and the oil crisis of 1979. In the late 1970s, big problems started in New Zealand. Their finances were in jeopardy because they took out loans to build infrastructure, and suddenly their incomes took a hit. There was no money to complete the projects, but the interest on the loan had to be paid. While all this continued until 1984, the New Zealand government took drastic action when the tax rate was halved from 66% to 33%. But at the same time, agricultural subsidies were cancelled. If a country that thrives on its agricultural products ends all subsidies, how will the country and, more importantly, its businesses survive? Logic says that the New Zealand dairy industry would shut down once the subsidies were removed, but interestingly, the opposite happened. New Zealand's dairy and wool industries survived. In the past, fertilizers were subsidized, so farmers used as much fertilizer as they wanted, but now they have adapted and started using it as needed. In 1983, meat production was exceeded too much. One study says that New Zealand used to produce so much excess meat that it was used to make fertilizer, which was a waste of resources. Basically, what happened in the past was that production increased, but the selling price was below cost. After the reforms, the focus changed from quantity to quality. How can you increase the productivity and production of the country? All these things were discussed. At the same time, how can farmers advance technologically? Farmers receive low-interest loans and market support training. On the contrary, farmers were trained to be competitive, and trade was encouraged. We must learn to change with the times. New Zealand's dairy industry is changing, and the demand for milk protein is changing. So New Zealand farmers are now focusing on making milk protein products from dairy products. After all, companies don't operate in a vacuum, must adapt to market feedback. And the last lesson is the ease of control. New Zealand is the pinnacle of ease in doing business. Corruption is the least common here. If you learned something new from this video, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.